great David Brinkley. When he was hired by Roone Arledge in 1981, Leonard Goldenson, who was again the founder of ABC, says in his biography he was against it. Why? Because he said David was too old. He was 61. By the time David Brinkley and Roone hired him, and Leonard later said, of course Roone was right. By the time he retired, he had done his Sunday program for us, This Week with David Brinkley, 1 year longer than the Huntley-Brinkley Report on NBC. He retired when he was 76. He was simply one of the great icons of our business, one of the original people in our business. Someone who, with his wry wit, could puncture pomposity, could also put things in ordinary language, was interesting to watch and listen to. Once a correspondent who later became an NBC anchor, who's now deceased, named John Chancellor, was arrested on the convention floor in 1964, the Republican convention in San Francisco, the first convention that I attended, because the Republican guards wanted him out of the way. And he, on the air, he said, "Is John Chancellor being arrested? This is an outrage, arrested somewhere on the floor of the Republican convention." They went up to the booth, of course, and here's Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. And David said, "Well, I don't know what they can charge him with. It can't be vagrancy. I know he has money in his pocket." And the way he said it, it just relieved the tension and all of that. Now, this week, he was the fulcrum. He was the reason I think people watched. But I was lucky enough to be part of then the family. And in television, if you have a family, whether it's a sitcom or, believe it or not, whether it's a news family that works. Here was George F. Will, the smartest kid on the block, the greatest conservative columnist I think we have to this day. But I mean, he'd throw Locke, Rousseau, the Federalist Papers at you. And then I played Mr. District Attorney. Just right up. Why'd you steal the money? Come on, come clean. And David, the genial, gentle host welcoming you. It just seemed to work. And then the wonderful Cokie Roberts joined us. And she, of course, brought this great, great ability. John Tower, nominated by President George Herbert Walker Bush to be the Secretary of Defense. His old enemy in the Senate, who was the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Sam Nunn, out to get him and not see him confirmed. And they all accused him of being a drunk and a womanizer. Well, he came on our Sunday program, David was off that Sunday, and announced to our great surprise that if I'm confirmed, I will not have another drop of spirits, alcohol during the entire time I was Secretary of Defense. Well, I said, "Well, Senator, but they also say you're a womanizer." "Well, Sam, what's a womanizer?" And I'm kind of flustered. And Cokie spoke up and she said, "Senator, I know one when I see one." And boy, it was not confirmed. Not because of our broadcast. But there were so many moments on the Brinkley broadcast that I remember. We were lucky. In the 80s, we were lucky to have David Brinkley. And we were lucky to have Roone Arledge, who made a television show out of it. It went to an hour, put in bumper music, beautiful pictures. The others were still trying to do a print press conference of the air, and they weren't competitive. Fine people in those broadcasts, but they just weren't competitive in television's time. It wasn't until the 90s that they got, particularly NBC, they started getting smart about how to do it. So we had, people would come on our program, or they wouldn't come on the other programs, or they'd come on our program first. We had that kind of competitive advantage, and it was just a terrific time. Well, when David Brinkley retired, the facts are we had lost our #1 status almost. We were going down, and Tim Russert of NBC and Meet the Press was coming up. And I'd been warning people. I said, "Look, this Tim Russert, hey, that guy's good, and they've gone to an hour now. They've made it a television show." You know? "Oh, no, we're #1. You know, he who the gods would destroy, they first say, you're #1. You know, and people then relax and say, well, I've been given divine right to be on top, and you know you're through that. So anyway, we were just about dead even. Now, trying to fill the shoes of a David Brinkley, not easy. In fact, impossible. Cokie and I made the effort, and for about 9 months, we retained our first place position by a hair. And then NBC's Meet the Press had its 50th anniversary, did 2 great shows, including the first hour with William Jefferson Clinton, and we dropped half a point that Sunday, and we, with a few minor exceptions, never came back to #1. And so Cokie and I did the show for about 6 years. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I love working with Cokie. She is the best in the business. But we were replaced in September of 2002 by George Stephanopoulos. That's the way it works in television. I have no complaints. There's no bitterness here. You move on. If you're number one, you stay forever. If you're number 2, 3, or 4, you leave. And so we left.